To have invited our international speaker, Kristін Haffert. Kristін is one of the leading experts in women's leadership and gender inclusion and starting initiatives that improve gender inclusion in organizations and improving effectiveness through gender inclusion. She is the co-founder of a consulting and advocacy firm called Mind the Gap, where they advise industries across sectors on how to improve their organizational effectiveness through gender inclusion. Kristін has started the very first women's program through the National Democratic Institute. She's traveled to over 100 countries all over the world, helping people on the local and national levels to improve women's leadership, to develop more gender-inclusive societies and organizations. And she is here with us today at America House to talk to you about the bottom line of gender-inclusive organizations. So please join me in welcoming Kristін Haffert.
Good morning. How are you? Welcome, and thank you for being here this morning. It's great to see new faces and some faces that have been here already. We have had a number of events. We had a number of events yesterday, and we've had some fantastic participants and great questions, and have covered a lot of ground. So thank you so much. I feel very American right now. So today, over the course of the last few days, we've talked about, what we need to do to help women become stronger leaders, advance in the workplace, advance in politics. My background is largely in the political space. So I worked for, nearly 15, almost 20 years on getting more women involved in politics, because I believed that was how we were going to change the world and have policies that reflected the interests of everyone. And then in the last couple years shifted to include working with companies, because we know that there's a lot more research on the corporate side that shows the bottom line impact of women's leadership. So the numbers are there. We have less evidence on the political side that shows how women lead. We have a lot of information about leadership styles, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But the evidence of how women lead in politics is actually a lot more anecdotal. And what's exciting is that we have great research by PricewaterhouseCoopers, by McKinsey, by an organization called Catalyst in the US that show how the bottom line impact of women's leadership on companies. And so we're going to go through a couple slides in a little bit that actually show these numbers and show that there's a return on investment, a return on equity, and that companies are performing better through women's leadership. Unfortunately, this research isn't actually widely known yet. I mean, it's out there and people are starting to use it, and different organizations, you're starting to see more and more women take up women's leadership and work with companies on this, but it's really still a very open field. And so we're finding that as we go into companies, they really haven't done a lot on women's leadership, except for some of the really, I guess, the more typical activities. Like a lot of companies have women's affinity groups, and the women will meet, but they're often not very strategic or targeted. The women will meet and they'll have speakers come in, but they're not really working towards a certain goal or really helping the women actually cultivate leadership skills. We see a lot of sponsorship programs, or not a lot of, but there are mentoring partnerships that some companies have set up for women internally, and then there are sponsorship programs where women have been set up with somebody who can actually advocate for them internally within the organization. So instead of that private one-on-one mentoring that a lot of us seek out, this is a sponsor is somebody who deliberately lobbies for you or advocates for you within your organization and says, when a position opens up, oh, I think Janet would be great for that position, or helps you strategically, think about where you want to be, in 5 years or in 2 years within the organization and helps you get there. And maybe you want to leave the organization in 2 years and you want to move to, a more senior position elsewhere. They will, they'll be your advocate, publicly and really help you be much more deliberate about getting ahead. So what I want to do before we get into the slides is talk a little bit about, how women and men are different in the workplace. Because the slides we're going to look at are all about the money that we see and the innovation that we see coming out of companies when you have women and men working together. But I first want to talk about the characteristics that we find and that the research shows that men and women do differently or have that actually create an environment that allows for this innovation or that allows for more money. And many of these factors have been well researched. Some studies will say the opposite, of course, of others. But there's a growing body of research that looks at the difference of male and female leadership styles. And of course, not all women are the same. We know this. Not all men are the same. And in fact, many women, they model very male leadership characteristics because this is who we learned from. So the concept of what a leader is usually, it's often very male. And this is really a global thing. And oftentimes I'll be in rooms with people like yourself, and I'll just say, who do you think, who's your favorite leader? Or who do you think, the best leaders are? And people raise their hands. Or just even if you say, what leaders can you think of? And almost always, every single one is a man that people say, and they don't even realize that they're doing it. So let's look at some of these differences between men and women in the workplace. And for those of you that have been with us yesterday, a couple of these will be things I've talked about already, but I definitely made sure that there's, we have new material in every session. So I'm thrilled that several of you have come back. So one of the things that the research shows is that women are less willing to take risks. They're more conservative about making decisions, whereas the male leadership style is more about risk taking, and men don't have as much of a problem taking risks. Another piece of research shows that men are willing to bluff a little bit more. So they'll bluff with clients. They'll bluff with customers. They'll kind of bluffing is really about it's a little bit faking, right? It's but to get ahead, and so it's I'm not saying it's dishonest. It's a style, and I can identify with this style, especially being in a client-facing business. And I think it's a useful technique, but this is something that we see men are willing to do. And as I go through these, I'm not saying one is better than the other. What this is really about is having the balance, right? If we had a world full of women, I would not want to be living in that. We've all been high school girls. I've said this before, and we know what high school girls can be like. And so, this is really about when you put men and women together, or a diverse group of people, how you actually get a different outcome. And this is, you have all these books. A lot of them are American, and I don't know if there are any here, that have become famous that are about heterosexual romantic relationships and how men and women need to understand each other in order to, have a good marriage, and how this will, make things easier for them. But we don't have this for the workplace. It's really missing. And so a lot of, the day-to-day differences of men and women of how they lead teams, how they make decisions, and do subtle things and overt things to highlight staff. These are all the factors that, when they come together, can really create a more dynamic, creative, and interesting space for the workplace to actually thrive. So one of the other things that the research shows is that women are better at sensing other people's emotional and facial recognition. So this because of the neurons in our brains and the fact that we have different chemicals in our makeup, we in our composition, we're able to sense how people are feeling or how people are thinking at a greater level oftentimes than men can. Men tend to be overconfident and optimistic, and this may fit with them being more of risk takers. I don't know, but this is something that we find, and so that's a factor in decision making. And women aren't as overconfident and optimistic because they have kind of this higher social sensitivity. So the fact that they're kind of reading people and have this maybe higher level of emotional awareness, they're not as willing to be overconfident, and possibly maybe this is why they're not as big of risk takers. Some of the interesting things that I thought of about women, and these are some things you can think of whether you identify with or not. We see that women are often better at taking initiative and really bringing projects to drive to results. So, and some of the questions that we've had over the last couple of days have been women saying, sometimes I just want to do the project myself because I feel like it's going to be better if I just finish it. But I need to have boundaries, and if I do that, I'm going to be doing everything. And this is maybe the negative side of women, being more, taking initiative. So it's really important for us to have boundaries and not to do other people's work for them. There is some value in letting other people fail. But this is difficult when we're working in teams, of course, and we're all trying to help each other succeed. One of the other things that I thought was interesting about women and positive in terms of the research is that they're better at role modeling and being they're also very clear about expectations. And the research doesn't say that men aren't clear about expectations, but women tend to be more direct about the expectations of what they want from you on a project or in a professional environment. Another big difference between men and women is that men react with action and women tend to react with feeling. And so this, of course, this could be good or bad, and who's to say, but back to the main point, if you have balanced teams, then if some people are reacting with feelings and others are reacting with actions, that's going to balance things out. And forgive me for those of you who heard me say this already, but I've read these feminist blogs, and some say that the financial crisis might not have happened if we had had more women in these big banks, and we won't know, but that's about risk taking versus being more conservative. One or two more things on men and women's differences in the workplace. In addition to being clear about expectations, women are also good about giving rewards or being, and really recognizing efforts, but also rewarding efforts and finding a way to make sure that their teams are satisfied and are rewarded for their performance. So these are just some different characteristics that we see. And again, there's this growing body of research. This is, I would say, a lot of what I took from this this session is from a Commonwealth report, actually, that looked at leadership styles among women. Now, before we go to the slides, I just want to check in with you and see if you have any questions about any of the leadership styles that we talked about. How many of you work with in a private company? Okay. How many of you work for an NGO? Government? Students? Okay, great. Okay, just getting a sense of who's here. So why don't we go here to the slides? So we talked about these gender differences, but now I want to go to the numbers and give you a sense of what some of the real meat behind this is. So, we looked at a variety of studies. They were all global, and so this material is really it's international. It's not U.S. specific. We saw that companies with 3 or more women had higher scores than teams with no women, and we saw that at least the scores of the performance of companies increased significantly when at least a third of the management team were women. When teams had, this is a question for you guys, when teams had 1 or more members who represented a target end user, the entire team was as much as, what percentage do you think, more likely to understand that the target end user, likely to understand the target, oh, that's not written right. I pulled these slides. I did an online course for UNDP, and it's for UNDP managers, and it became mandatory. It was initially an optional course. The Women in Leadership course and the Diversity course were optional, and I took some screenshots from that, and I realized that's not quite written right. But anyway, the point is, when we're talking about the targeted end user, we're talking about the customer, or so what percentage do you think is appropriate here? If you had teams with 1 or more members who represented the targeted end user. 150. Yeah, this one was really crazy. Yeah, this came from the Center for Talent Innovation, and looked at 40 case studies and 1,800 employee surveys. This was a big study. We looked at corporate studies, and we looked at the Institute for Family and Work also has some great research on this, for those of you that want to follow up. But yeah, so you're really enhancing the ability of performance when you have diverse teams. And so then if you think about ethnic minorities and people of color, and really having people who represent different ideas and different experiences, you're able to reach your audience to a much greater degree. We're doing work with Amazon, Amazon Web Services, and everybody knows Amazon from the packages, but Amazon also has a cloud service, which many of you might know, and their cloud service hosts Spotify and other large customers, and they are working really hard to get more women and people of color into tech, because they see, and it's similar to many of their peer companies, it's just a lot of white men, and there are some, they've got a decent portion of Indian men, they've got a growing portion of women, but they're really struggling because women aren't, either if they are in the sciences, they're dropping out and not, going into these technical roles. So they want to know that the world's going to have more developers that are people of color, because if they can create and shape their cloud service with people who, understand all kinds of different customers and all different kinds of consumers, then they're going to be able to improve the ability of the cloud to serve them. So one of the things that we looked at I've shared with many clients, but also for this UNDP online course is, when you don't have a diverse group of people making decisions, oftentimes there are really big mistakes that happen and embarrassing mistakes for companies. So this is one example where, it was the Bic pens, it was in South Africa that they generated this ad to celebrate International Women's Day that said, look like a girl, act like a lady, think like a man, and work like a boss, which I'm offended by that, and it turns out a lot of other women were too. So, and there probably, I'm guessing there probably weren't any women in the room when this slogan was selected to celebrate International Women's Day. There are, there's another example just to give you a sense. In the United States, Coors Light, the beer, one of our cheap beers, is owned by South African breweries, and they, which actually it's no coincidence about this being a South African example, and I mean it is a coincidence, because I'm sure it was it was the American label of Coors Light. But anyway, about 2 years ago, Coors Light was printing little slogans on the side of the bottles, similar to what you see on the Coke cans sometimes during the Olympics. But anyway, there was a slogan, and it kept changing, every few months. And about 2 years ago, when one of the slogans went onto the bottles, it was at the same time that a lot of research had come out in the U.S. about sexual assault on college campuses. And everybody was saying, oh my gosh, we didn't know that sexual assault was happening at this kind of rate on college campuses, which a lot of us knew this was happening. I mean, I went to a women's college and we knew this was happening. But anyway, the slogan that came out on the bottle right after all of this media press about sexual assault on campuses is something about, the best thing to help you not say no, or something like this, and no means no is, what we're taught in the U.S. and I think this is a global phrase, but no means no, is a way of trying to, be clear about, not wanting, making sure you don't get unwanted attention. And so this slogan just, it blew up for Coors Light. It was a total disaster. They had to recall the bottles. They lost a lot of money. It took the time of the CEO to, mitigate this from a messaging perspective. And so if we look at the flip side of not having diverse teams, it's not just a missed opportunity. You can have really, big gaffes occur. And especially when you're marketing products that might be, if your consumer base is 50% women, or if your consumer base is 30% women, or if it's 80% women, and you don't have a team that reflects that, not person for person, percentage for percentage, but if you have, a makeup line and, you have a lot of men kind of making decisions about the advertising, that's probably not your best, your best approach to reaching your customers, right? Okay, so as we're saying, a gender-inclusive workforce is able to reach their customers. And so for those of you working in NGOs, we did this work with UN agencies, with donors, with nonprofits, and we would just, instead of saying, okay, how much money do you want to make, or what's your business objective, we looked at their objectives. And so for UNDP, when we created this, and we talked about the business case, it was the Sustainable Development Goals, because that's what UNDP, their framework for achieving success is achieving these Sustainable Development Goals that they've established. And so the question for you is, what are the organizational goals, where you are, and how do you need to think about what you need to do with differently with men and with women in order to achieve them? So yesterday I used an example of, mosquito nets. If we were trying to get mosquito nets out to women and men in a certain community or in a certain part of say, Zambia, we know that men and women spend time in different places. So, you know, maybe at the health clinic you would have the mosquito nets, and we did this in South Sudan. We put the mosquito nets at the, we partnered, I was doing democracy work, but there was a partnership with the health clinics, and we had the mosquito nets at the health clinics because the women were coming and bringing their children there. And then, you know, you have to figure out, okay, where are the men, and how do you get them the mosquito nets, you know? So it's working backwards from what are the objectives of your organization or your program. You know, this can really be very simple. And, you know, when we looked at like voting in Afghanistan, a lot of the women can't leave their home, you know? And so one of my colleagues said, why don't we bring a mobile voting box to homes? And, you know, it's debatable whether that's a good idea or not. You know, elections are set up in a transparent way for a reason, and we go to polling locations for that reason. But, you know, but he was trying to be creative about working backwards to say, okay, how, if we want women to vote, you know, how are we going to do this? We'll bring the vote to them. We did not do that. Okay. So among companies with more than 10 billion in annual revenues, what percentage do you think strongly agreed that diversity helps drive innovation? Anyone?
5. So 85.
85?
Yeah. 100.
Okay, so, yeah, nice. Yeah, you got it. So 85% strongly or somewhat agreed that diversity, of which gender is a component. So this was a larger diversity study. Nice job. Was crucial to fostering innovation in the workplace. Okay, so here, this is one of my favorite slides because this really shows you if looking at Fortune 500 companies, you get a higher return on equity, a higher return on sales, and a return on invested capital when you have more women. I think this actually was, if you had more than 30% women on the, if you had more than a third of women on the board, this is what you, or sorry, more than 3 women on the board, that's what it was. More than 3 women, you got these numbers. And so you can see that there's a clear return on investment. And again, I wish we had these numbers for women in politics to show that they bring different legislation, and you know, and then when you have men and women together, you get really an expanded portfolio of policy ideas and policy approaches. But here we have, you know, this and another study that was done by a group called Pax Elevate, looked at Fortune 500 companies with more than 30% women on the board and Fortune 500 companies without any. And the Fortune 500 companies with more than 30% of women on the board outperformed those without. So that's another very powerful statistic. And Sally Krawcheck, who was a big banker on Wall Street, she started an investment firm called Pax. And then she did a spin-off called Pax Elevate, which is all about investing in women. And so she's one of the people and one of the voices now out there talking about a lot of these economic numbers. So, okay, here's another question for you. When 25 Fortune 500 companies with the best record of promoting women into high positions were examined, they saw higher profits of what when compared to the median Fortune 500 firms within their same industry? 17 to 32? It's higher. It's 18 to 69%. Oh, that's the wrong, I have the wrong thing here. I apologize. It's 18 to 69% actually is the answer, which is a huge range, which actually looks like it's, you know, wrong. But there was a wide range, but it was, it shows you how great the opportunity is, right? This is a different statistic that we can talk about, even though it doesn't match the questions. I apologize. According to the McKinsey Global Institute, if women played an identical role in labor markets to that of men, we would have 28 trillion or 26% added to the global annual GDP. That's just the annual GDP. And then we also know, a lot of women are not paid for the work that they're doing, right? So then that's a whole, that's a piece that's not being captured. Okay. Now we just did the answer to this. Oops. 28 trillion, right? We just saw this. So, to the annual GDP. So $28 trillion is being lost every year by the lack of parity in the workforce. So what countries could do with that money? You think about the poverty, or you think about, all the programs that could be funded on a variety of social issues, or clean water, whatever it is that's important, in a particular country. That is really a shocking statistic. So those are just some slides that I want to go through. Sorry, guys. So are there questions? Any questions yet? Okay. So now I want to turn to some of the workplace practices that we see that are beneficial. And I'm curious, how many of you have been mentored? Only 2? Okay. Well, okay, you're not sure. Sort of. Okay. How many of you have mentored someone else? Okay, more of you. Okay. And how many of you have mentored women? Okay. And don't worry. We're happy to have you here. You're totally underrepresented. This is what we normally feel like. Yeah. No, we're glad you're here. We're really glad to have Ben in the room. Because again, this is about coming together and really producing something great. And so we talk about the untapped opportunity, and we talk about, the lack of women's opportunity. But again, this is about not just the financial benefits, but also the creativity and the innovation that comes out. And that's what we see in the research too, is that we know teams are more innovative. And so it's a number of opportunities that are being missed. Okay. So how many of you have been sponsored? How many of you have sponsorship programs even in your organization? Okay.
What is it?
Sure. So mentoring, we know, we've been talking about mentoring for years. And there's a lot to say about mentoring and a lot of different ways of doing it. But mentoring happens really kind of privately, and it's, you getting support from someone else and asking for advice, or and it can be on professional stuff and personal stuff. It doesn't have to, and oftentimes, and we know that our lives, this is all about kind of getting that balance right. So mentors can really help you with both of those things. Sponsorship is when you have somebody that's a public advocate for you within your organization. So they're the person that says, this person would be great for that role, when something opens up. So being really direct about it. Okay, so we have one person that's been sponsored. So you have been sponsored. Okay, interesting. We see less sponsorship programs, but those are growing within companies. And another, for those of you that want to do follow-up research, there is a group called the Male Champions of Change in Australia, and they're doing exceptional work really the work is happening in all kinds of Australian and multinational companies based in Australia, because the sex discrimination commissioner, small difference, she decided that if she got male CEOs to sign on to a declaration to say that they would do more for women in their organizations and take it really seriously, that would really move the needle in terms of advancing women's leadership in companies. And so companies have tried all different really, unique and a lot of mentoring, sponsorship, and things that we hear a lot about within their companies, or they've tried to do flex working, flex time, or family leave, parental leave policies that help promote and retain women and help women be promoted and still feel like they're working in an environment that supports them and where they can get ahead, and that respects that they have, a family life, and also, and that men have a family life as well. So they have some great examples, and the reason why I think this has been so successful is the research shows that if you have buy-in from top leadership within organizations, you are much more successful in advancing these policies, and that's kind of seems like a no-brainer. But you can only go so far when you have kind of middle management, or if you don't have buy-in from the CEO or the executive director, it's really difficult to make these changes, because they're about culture change. They're about organizational culture change. And that's really what we do at Project Mind the Gap. We work on building women's leadership skills within organizations, but also we work on helping to change the environment. And so the question for you is, what needs to change within your organization in order for women to feel more supported, or to get raises, or to get promoted, or to get more public recognition? There are a lot of different steps that we can take, for our teams directly, from wherever you sit. You can do things, even if you're not in a management position, to recognize other people and to, create a more inclusive and supportive environment. Again, you need the buy-in from the top to really make big changes, but we all can actually start modeling behavior where we do things like give credit to other people when they actually perform. So that's another thing that women are better at doing. They actually don't take credit when they do things, which isn't good. Women often say, we did this and we did that, instead of I did this. Because there's a perception that if women say I, they look like they're being arrogant or something. And it's really important to own what you do and to take credit for it, because if you don't take credit for it, someone else is going to take credit for it. And at the same time, it's important to give people credit for the work that they're doing, and not to claim, I did this when, it took an entire army to accomplish something, and late nights of, hard work by a lot of other people. Okay, so there are a number of other approaches that can take place in the workspace, and I want to kind of get a sense of whether some of your organizations, do you know if you're tracking statistics of by sex disaggregated statistics, so of who's in the organization? Like, do you know how many women are in leadership positions? Is any of this being tracked? And that's something to consider. And then if these numbers are being tracked, the question is, are you analyzing it? And if you're in a small organization, it's easy to see who's in leadership. But the problem is, what we see is you often have men at the very top, and you have women, kind of at the second rung down, if you're lucky, doing a lot of the work, but it's very difficult for them to get up to that top position. And this is definitely what we hear from your colleagues in Ukraine. And so what is that? What are those barriers about? Are they just about stereotypes, or are they about what can the organization do? Can they, change different policies, recruitment policies? So, for example, do you say we're gonna interview 50% women and 50% men for each position that we're hiring for, or we're at least going to make sure we have 50% applications from women and from men? And someone may say to you, well, that's I can't control that, but you can. And this is what it comes down to, is if you want to make these organizational changes, you have to be very deliberate. And actually, UNDP, who we worked with, sorry, you have to look at that. UNDP, that when we worked with them, they've been really stellar within the UN system at making very concrete targets internally for women's leadership, and they have about 3 or 4 different plans in true UN fashion that kind of overlap and do somewhat of the similar things. But they have clear goals that say we are going to have 50%, we're going to have parity by X year, and they have a roadmap for getting there. They have a gender parity plan, they have a gender strategy. Yeah. Right. And so, but what UNDP was starting to understand, and what we're doing with Amazon, is that you can't go out in the world and say, we care about women's leadership, we're promoting women, if you're not doing it internally. And so what we see in companies and in any organization, if you go out and say you're doing this, and you're not actually doing it with your own people, there's a disconnect, and the people internally within the organization get really frustrated. So I worked for a democracy organization, NDI, National Democratic Institute, and people would often, NDI was a great place to work for, but people would often expect that NDI needed to be a democracy because we were working for a democratic organization. But there was we were more highly attuned to how we got to influence decisions internally because we were going around the world saying, democracy is the best model. And so, making sure there's alignment between what you're saying externally and what you're doing internally is really, really important. So I'm going to pause there and see if you have your quiet group. Usually there are a lot of questions. So do you have any questions so far about women in the workplace, whether it's skills or this organizational piece? Yes. Yeah. Hold 1 second. We're live streaming, so thanks.
Okay. Hey. Hi. I have a question about maternity leaves, actually, and how that influences the company's policy about employing women and having them in high up positions, because this is a big question, because we see this thing in organization when women say they don't want to hire me or promote me because they expect me to have children somewhere in the way, and what's the best way to work around that?
That's a great question. So one of the myths that we find, people think that women leave jobs because they have kids. They don't leave jobs because they have kids. They leave because they feel like they don't have the flexibility that they need when they come back. So they've already worked for the organization, right? So they know that if they go back, they're not, this organization doesn't support the ability for them to get ahead or to move up in the same way. And oftentimes you hear women saying that they don't want promotions, and this has come up here several times, and even in the last 24 hours. The people, women say they don't want to be promoted or they're happy in their position. And I have to say, do they really not want to be promoted? Or, do they really not want the extra responsibility? And what's that about? Is that about the fact that they really are completely content in the position that they have? Or they know that family life balance is going to be completely, off kilter for them if they take on more responsibility. And I think more often than not, that's the issue. So what we see is there are a number of countries that have put, parental leave, so where the mother and the father can take time off, and that's been a really successful model, and it's growing. I mean, it's really the Scandinavian countries that have led the way on this. But this is one of the fundamental areas where companies can actually make the most progress, because it does have a huge impact. There's a company in the United States called Patagonia that has like outdoor stuff. They have a 99% return rate of working mothers because of and I don't know about the dads. This is just the statistic that they shared when I saw them speaking at an event. But they have on-site childcare, and so and it's actually not even contracted out to some other company. It's Patagonia. They're Patagonia employees that are hired to provide childcare on site. So the women and men come back to work, and they see their kids playing with their colleagues' kids, and so on-site childcare is another component. But we do see that this is a major issue, and it's hard for me to speak on this particular issue because we're a country that has no paid leave. We get 6 weeks off. And a law that says you get your job back, and then it can't go to anybody else. That's all we have, 6 weeks. And so if you are, dependent on your day-to-day salary, and you don't have money in the bank, you have to go back to work in 6 weeks. So it's really dismal. And in fact, we're about to work on a paid leave project with a major philanthropist in the U.S. In the absence of a federal policy, we're going to start targeting businesses directly and educating them about kind of very progressive paid leave plans and how they can incorporate them, because we know that this is about the long game. This is not the short game, this is the long game. And this is another really important point. The changes we're talking about and the impact that we're going to see, some of it is going to happen, with a particular team very quickly when you have a diverse team, but some of this is about the long game. And paid leave, the companies that invest in paid leave programs are going to see the returns, and we actually know that. I mean, there's not a lot of research because, there's not a ton of research on this. But what we know anecdotally is that a lot of the CEOs say that this is the best thing we ever did. Like if we had known how great this would be for our retention and for our, people's well-being in the company and feeling like they're valued and that you are having a more human-centric approach, then they would have done it, much sooner. So, other questions? Yes. Oh. Coming.
This is a question concerning your practice in the sphere of gender inclusive to business company. Do you have any case for your cooperation with small and medium entrepreneurship, not company included in the Fortune 500 list, but the company who represent a small and medium business, maybe in the US, not in other countries, or maybe you have something example in Eastern Europe also. And my question is focusing, when you're going for this type of company, what is your one of two first argument to including gender inclusive program in the business strategy? What are you talking about? What is your main reasons? It's one size and other size. Who is a better direct person which you'd like to start conversation about the subject in the company level, in the corporation level? What is the better when you're starting this is consultancy or advocacy program on the business level? First of all, how are you including in the business strategy gender inclusive?
Okay,
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. So we are really carving out a new space. We call ourselves gender advisors. We do advocacy, so we have two streams to our business. We have the consulting side, but Jessica, my business partner, Jessica Grounds, my business partner, and I have both worked in women's leadership for 20 years, and we want to continue to work on projects that close the gender gap. So we have an advocacy component too. So we incubate projects that are, new ways of closing the gender gap. So that's one piece we do on the side. In the consulting practice, to be quite honest, we have mainly gone into companies through friends of friends or contacts, just contacts people have given us of people who are friendly to this idea or open to this idea. Or sometimes we're both pretty good at networking, so we might be out at night talking about what we do, and someone will say, oh, hey, I know so-and-so is talking about this, why don't we link you up? And sometimes it turns into business, sometimes it doesn't, but I will say, we're going in through people who get it. And we're not usually meeting with the HR people or the typical areas of the diversity and inclusion people. Sometimes they sit in marketing, sometimes they sit, on the product side. It really depends, but that's how we know that we need gender champions within organizations. And so, and actually one of the projects that we're incubating is called a Gender Catalyst project. We don't work with small and medium enterprises, or we do, but I don't have any of that research. There's the World Bank has some good research on small and medium enterprises. The way we go into companies is to show this big data. I mean, that's really how we lead. We're doing organizational culture change. We're doing women's leadership work. And we go in with the data because it's the most compelling thing. And the numbers are what speak to men too. It's what gets men's attention. And when they're the decision makers, we need to think about, what do they care about? So that's really our most compelling argument. And then once we're in the door, and we also use the training for women because everybody wants to train the women in their organizations, and they feel like they have to, and you go and you train these women who are senior executives, and they're like, yeah, I'll take another training, but it's not going to change anything in this organization, because you need to do the organizational culture piece, and you have to change people's perceptions and how they talk to each other, and the reward system and the internal policies. And so that's really, we go in with the data, we go in with women's leadership, and then we really talk about the organizational culture change, which, is a little bit of a harder conversation. Yes. Oh.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. We are here representing the governmental part, let's say so, and I have such a question. So when you come to business and you show this big data and you're talking about like real money, ROI, and like investments, so on, how do you convince politicians who work with things that can be measured with like very exact and specific things like money, investments, and so on?
Great question. So a lot of the work I did was trying to convince politicians. And I can think of even being in places like Yemen and sitting with male leaders and Afghanistan, and that was some of the hardest work I've ever done. And the way we did that was we said, this is in your best interest. And that's really, if I could leave you with any point today, this is in the best interest of everyone. This is not just in the best interest of women. And so we help companies understand it's in their best interest for financial reasons. For political leaders or politicians or government leaders, they're going to be performing their job better if they think about their constituents, and they are very targeted about what their constituents need. So, in government, if whether you're talking about transportation or trash collection or support to daycare centers, the question is, we all have different needs. So what are the needs of men and women in a certain community? And I promise you, they are different. And the question is, if those are those government leaders actually asking themselves that question? You know, do I need to do something differently here, or do I just have this universal policy, a gender-blind policy? Gender-blind is not gender-good or gender-positive. Gender-blind treats everyone the same, and we're not the same, you know? We're different, and that's good, you know? Yeah, and so with political parties, you know, this was really hard. I couldn't believe that this was so challenging, but part of it was that the political parties weren't sophisticated organizations. They were still really, you know, understanding how to be an effective political party. The political parties, I would say, look, none of you are actually speaking about issues that women care about, specifically. And if one political party does in this election, then you already have an edge. You already have an advantage, you know? But if you didn't have women in the political party in high-level decision-making positions who could really inject those issues or those concerns, or talk about corruption or things, you know, talk about things in from their frame of reference, then it wouldn't happen. And so this is actually, it moves us into the last part of the session here today, which is, if you don't have that diversity internally, you actually can't be effective. So the government, if they are not thinking about what women and men need differently, and they're not programming around it and budgeting it around it, that's why gender budgeting is becoming so huge. But if they're not programming around it and budgeting around it, then it's not going to happen. And it's not going to serve the needs of the people. So, you know, you really need to go back to, okay, what department are you working in? Who are they trying to serve? Is it the Department of Education? You know, yesterday there was one of our colleagues was here, and she was saying, you know, I work on a State Department State Department funded program for students here in Ukraine, an education program, and like 80% of the program participants are women, and it's just women are naturally attracted to this program that she's running. And I said, that's really interesting. What are you going to do? She said, I have some ideas now about how to recruit men, because they have this really out of whack problem. And it's the same with the group we're working with on Youth for Exchange in the United States. They have 80% of their program participants are women that want to study abroad, or that want to do the virtual exchange study abroad, roughly 80%. And it's just, for some reason, it's not as appealing in the same way to men. So we have to ask ourselves, why are men not attracted to the study abroad program? Why do they not want to do the virtual study abroad exchange? You know, what is it is it about the content of the programs? Is it about just what men and women are naturally attracted to from, you know, the perspective of travel? Is it about the actual marketing of what this organization is doing and who they're reaching? And so what are they going to do differently in order to reach men and get more men? And are they? You know, this is the thing. You know, are you happy just serving 80% women? Seems like a missed opportunity, you know? Because those women, those 80% women who come and do the exchange programs, and we worked with the 80% women in the virtual exchange, is women talking to other women, you know? Now, there's a role for that in the world, and that's a good thing, but that's not what the world is. You know, the world is a very different picture. So what we're going to do is actually, we're going to do a short exercise, and what this is about is, you know, we talk about how if you don't have if you don't have that diversity internally, you can't actually, you know, meet your customers' needs or meet your constituents' needs. And so what I want to do is to put you in just a few small groups to look at an organization that one of you works for, and we'll see how we break you out. But we want to look backwards and say, you know, what is your organization's objective, and is it meeting the needs of men and of women. And who's participating. So which agency do you work for, or which part of the government?
My colleague, we are working for the Ministry of Internal Affairs, and actually one of our pet projects, like, so let's say it's implementation of United Nations Resolution 1325,
Okay.
which is about gender.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Maybe you want to add something? No? So Ministry of Internal Affairs.
Okay. So the question is, what are the broader goals of the ministry? What does internal affairs have to do to serve the country, right? And then you work backwards and you say, okay, do the policies? So we're gonna talk about policies. Do the policies actually, consider men and women? Do the programs or the outreach consider men and women? Does the budget? And we may not know this about all of our organizations, but if we look at what we're trying to achieve and we work backwards, the question you're gonna talk about in your groups is, are you reaching your audience? Like, who is your audience? Are you reaching them? And do you need to do anything differently with men and with women in order to achieve your organizational goal? Does that make sense? Okay. So I think what we'll do is actually break out by numbers. So I'm going to actually count you off, if that's okay, and then we'll put you in groups. And what I'd like for you to do is pick one person in the group who's working for an organization that can talk about what their organization is doing, and what their organization's goal is, or it could be what your program is. But it's better, ideally, if you can do it for your organization, that would be great. And then talk about, what is the organization doing in order to achieve it, and is it doing something differently with men and with women, or does it need to, and what does that look like? What does it need to do differently? Are you with me? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So I'll count you off, and so just please remember your number when I say it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Why did I just count to 20? That is not helpful. I meant to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, because there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I can count. I can't do math, but I can count to 20.
Now you know 4 is a good count.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, so we did that out loud. Okay, so now let's start over. You'll be 1, 2, 3, or 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that everyone? Okay. So the ones should meet over here. The twos can meet in the back corner over there. The threes can meet over here. And then the fours can meet back in the back by the computer. So ones, twos, threes, and fours.